Hello and welcome back to the Down to the Wire podcast. We are on episode 12. Yeah, we're on episode 12. Got another exciting podcast of sporting gossip from the last week. There is me here. There is Jack Freeman here. How are you, Jack?
I'm good.
And we are also joined by Josh. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm okay, thanks. It's good to be back.
Good stuff. We're going to be having a good old breakdown of the NFL later because obviously we had the divisional round of the playoffs this week.
That was a championship round, that was.
It was. That's a good start. That's what I meant. we now have the best of the AFC and the best of the NFC. We've got the Super Bowl lined up. And we'll do a bit of talking about the football. So I guess we should crack on, lads.
Let's do that.
You there, Josh?
I am still here, yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
We're clearly less enthused about the football, more enthused about the NFL, that's what it is.
Yes. Yeah, it's like, okay, if we have to. Right, we'll kick off with the football, like we said. I guess the big news this week is goodbye Frank Lampard. He has been sacked by Chelsea. Caught me off guard. What do you guys think?
Yes and no. It caught me off guard a little, but equally, it's Chelsea, it's Roman Abramovich, so when you stop to think about it doesn't shock you?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it didn't shock me one bit, in the sense that what he's done with what he has is sackable, and classically from Chelsea's standpoint of view, if you were to do that, you would have got sacked.
Yeah.
The only thing that surprised me was the fact that because it's Frank Lampard and they have all those banners like trusted him then, trusted him now, trusted him forever. Clearly they don't. Clearly it was just then. I was a bit surprised that they just jumped on from him so quickly just as he was a cult legend. But clearly Abramovich doesn't care who you are, what your background is. You know, you could have won them a couple of Premier Leagues and then returned, won them another one, and you'll still get the sack, just like Mourinho did. So there's no loyalty there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well what you said about, you thought you'd be given more time. I don't know about you, perhaps because of the transfer ban, it was a bit different, but in my head, you were kind of like, well, they kind of stuck with him through the tricky relative to the fact that he couldn't sign his own players last season, and now they've given him half a season with players that he's wanted and bought, and they've gone, see you later.
That's the shocking part, is that on Chelsea's part, the only logical thing is to give him a season with the signings he's made.
Yeah.
They have levelled against Lampard that he spent 200 million, so it's not a good look languishing down in 10th when you've spent 200 million on transfers. Yeah. But if you've spent 200 million on transfers and Chelsea didn't spend that on one player, they bought in a number of players, well, it's going to take time for them to bed in, and it's going to take time for them to perform. And Chelsea have also got some dead rubber players there that there's rumours now, isn't there, that they're upset in the dressing room, which that's another issue entirely. But to allow him to spend 200 million and then in January say, no, we don't like how you're performing, you're out, is just crazy short-sighted thinking for me.
Although you've got to say though that how much grace period can you actually give them? Like, in a sense, I know they didn't get the preseason they wanted, but they knew they weren't going to get the preseason they wanted, so that's not really an excuse. You're going to spend 200 million without a preseason. You get what you deserve in terms of it's probably not going to be kick from the start. You know what I mean? Go quickly off the line or whatever. But at the same time, it's like by January you'd hope they got some form, and if anything, they were going downhill. And that's when they probably should have been finding form with these new guys who've finally fitted in. You know what I mean? That first season of signing a load of players isn't just, what happens, and next season we go for it proper. I think you've got to show some signs at some point throughout the season that these are good signings and the manager knows how to use them for it to be considered a success. I don't think you can give them a whole season necessarily and think, yeah, that's good.
Well, I mean, the thing is it's a bit of a tricky one because obviously, the longer you stick with him, the more difficult it's going to get. But, I say the more difficult it's going to get until results start to turn around, obviously. But there's a part of me that thinks that, half a season is not a very long time, and I get what you're saying about the amount of money spent. I think the problem when you spend that sort of money is that all of a sudden you're under the microscope. I remember the first podcast we did, I said that one of the teams that, as a Liverpool fan, I was probably most concerned about at the start of the season was Chelsea. But I don't know. I'm not sure what I make of Tuchel as a replacement, I'll be honest. And given how volatile the table has been this season, give it 2 weeks and Chelsea could be in the top 4. And then can you really, as in, okay, ideally when you're spending that sort of money, you want to be challenging for the title. But then you kind of look at it and go, well, we've got top 4, they've had a season to bed in, and then it's the following season, then you go, right, we need to kick on now. We need to really progress. So I get what you're saying about the 200 million, but I think to give him less than a full season with his own signings seems a little bit bonkers. But then when you put into context of this Chelsea, I guess I'm not really that surprised. Yeah, perhaps we should kind of do a little bit of the breakdown of the kind of stats of where Chelsea are at the moment. So Jack, you've put some notes in.
I did just quickly try and double check them because obviously we planned on doing this Monday, but it's a Thursday, so some of these stats have changed slightly. But if everyone wins their games in hand, which of course is an impossibility because some people play each other, but on a very linear level, if everyone wins their games in hand, Chelsea will be 9 points off of top 4 at the end of that, which is a little bit of a concern. They're now probably closer to Arsenal than they are to the top 4, which is quite a alarming.
I'm pretty sure they're equal on points with Arsenal. I think Arsenal and Chelsea are level.
Arsenal won yesterday, didn't they? They beat
So that's how close they are. 4 goals in it. Which, that's not good considering, especially as I know Arsenal are always classically a big team, but they haven't spent a lot of money for a while.
No, they're clearly
teams go through rebuilds, but that's not even at the foundations of a rebuild.
No, they're kind of very much at the trough, aren't they? As in if you look at where the trajectory is, they're kind of, without wanting to be too condescending, it can only really go up from here. You'd like to think if you're an Arsenal fan.
Incidentally, what you say about Arsenal not spending money, going back to Lampard, I think that's something that's gone against him, is because at a time where other clubs really haven't spent money, Chelsea went out and splashed 200 million, and I think it's allowed every football fan everywhere to hold Lampard in comparison with all of the teams who haven't spent money. And
for those who haven't spent money, it's almost like a safety blanket of we didn't spend money this season. We haven't invested we haven't dipped into the transfer market this year. Whereas Frank Lampard hasn't got that kind of protection.
Yeah, I was going to say that then, because we mentioned last week about I think we mentioned it last week. If we didn't, then this is just something this is fresh. But the Indianapolis Colts general manager was saying about a quarterback, and he was saying we haven't drafted a quarterback, and he's been the general manager for about 4 or 5 years now, and they haven't drafted a quarterback because he knows he's not going to take any quarterback. He's going to wait till the right one comes and then go for that one, because as soon as you draft a quarterback and it doesn't work, he's out of a job. And the same sort of thing's happening for Lampard too. It's like, if you just sort of work with those players for 2-3 years, don't buy anybody, I'm sure he's keeping a job all that time because none of that pressure is on him. Yeah, that's the thing. You go out there and you say to Abramovich, I think these are good signings. Let's spend 200 million on this lot. You've got to be pretty sure that it's going to work, because if it doesn't, this is the exact result you're going to get. And
it's linked to expectations, isn't it? The expectations just went through the roof for Chelsea in the space of 2 months. All of a sudden, the amount of expectation on Lampard just went into the stratosphere, really, didn't it? In the space of a couple of months.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I feel like a lot of people fell into that. I mean, I know when I was doing my fantasy team, I was thinking Chelsea are going to be such a good team. I put in Havertz, I put in Werner in there, and everyone thought this team's going to blow everyone out of the water. Like, considering where they were last season, and it's only improved, but my goodness, has it gone down?
That's the thing, isn't it? And you were kind of looking at it, and last season, they were starting, Mason Mount, is very good. Tammy Abraham, who is good, but when they bring Timo Werner and you're kind of looking at it and going, there's not really much competition there, or on paper anyway. And then you look at
and that comes with the pressure that you have to play those big name signings. You can no longer afford to start Tammy Abraham, because then it's a failed signing and it's even more pressure on him.
Yeah, and the thing is, their current position is so far below what was expected of them this season. When asked to predict what would be the top 4 at the start of the season, I wouldn't. I don't know what I would have said, but I think I would have had Chelsea in there, and I think that would have been the majority of football fans.
I'm sure I said that on this podcast.
Yeah,
somewhere along the
top
line.
4, and
they are.
All thought Chelsea were going to be up there with Spurs.
Yeah, so they're a long way below where they would have hoped to be at this stage of the season.
Absolutely.
But when I say, the only logical thing is to give him the season, long run, the only logical thing is to give him the season.
Agreed,
and then at the end of the season, if Chelsea is still 10th, well then, that is a much more damning indictment on Lampard than being 10th in January. As far as I can see, the reasons for sacking a manager now under these sort of circumstances, that usually there'd potentially be an element of, he's lost the dressing room. And that is the point where, as a club, you just can't see things turning around. If the man, like Mourinho at United, like Mourinho at Chelsea. The second time, I mean. But, if the manager's lost the dressing room, then there's no scope for it turning around. That doesn't seem to be the case. There's reports coming out that players like Rudiger are upset in the dressing room, but there doesn't seem to be a consensus that Lampard has lost the trust of the players.
Especially because Rudiger's not even a key player. He's a fringe player. He's not even a starter. So, I'm sure plenty of players are like that. I'm sure Mason Mount will be with Thomas Tuchel, because I don't think he'll get a minute with him.
Yeah, but I think, Abramovich, Chelsea sacking Lampard now has to be a sign that they don't want to settle for anything less than getting into the top 4 this season. They're not willing to wait a year. They're not willing to give it till the end of the season and put it down to, well, look, we had a lot of new signings. It took bedding in with the fixture congestion, with everything else that's going on, no crowds, the virus. We're happy to go for top 4 next year. I think the fact they've sacked him is that they've got Tuchel in to hope that they're going to get into the top 4. But the problem they're going to have is that that top 4 race is very, very congested. Like, you've got a lot of teams there, and Chelsea are coming from the very bottom of that pile. Yeah,
but they are still in the fight, which is surprising, is how bad they've been. To say that they're only on the current standings, they're only 5 points off now. I know obviously they could be 9 if other teams win, but if you say you're doing this bad, but you're still only 5, you go, well, if we got a chance, maybe they would have stuck with Lampard if they were further out of the race to see if we could get back into it. But yeah, when you've got the opportunity, I think you've got to go for it, because it's like 100 million euros if you make it.
Yeah. On that note, then, Thomas Tuchel's come in. What are your initial thoughts on? I know obviously Chelsea played yesterday and they drew 0-0, but he'd been there for less than 24 hours, I think, by that point. But what are your thoughts on Tuchel going forward?
I think it could be a smart signing. I don't know, like, in a sense he's unproven, in the sense that he's been to some big clubs and he's gotten them quite far, but he's never won anything comprehensive, in a sense. No. I know he did. Thing is, he's been in Germany, so he's German firstly, which helps out with Werner and Havertz, and he's coached Pulisic before. So there's 3 of the key players. I mean, that's 3 of the main attackers for Chelsea. So there's some sort of help there. But also he's coached Thiago Silva over at PSG, and with PSG he made the Champions League semis, and I imagine they probably won the league. Oh, final, sorry, yeah. I always get mixed up with who got where. But in a sense, that's Abramovich all over. He likes the league, but he loves the Champions League, and that was always his goal, to win it. And he has won it, and I'm sure he wants more of them. Yeah,
I mean, I'm a little bit jury's out with Tuchel. I think perhaps it's because, obviously in England we haven't seen a massive amount of him, because, like you said, he's been in the Bundesliga and Liga 1. I do think it's very much a case of he's the best option out there. I don't think, as in, apart from Tuchel, I wouldn't have been able really to suggest another potential candidate. I don't know whether you guys would have.
Well, Big Sam was available a couple of weeks ago, but obviously he's not there now.
Big Sam, the relegation man, saved Chelsea from the doldrums. No, but as in, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Like you said, there could be a bit of a benefit for, Tuchel with the German players. I mean, obviously there could also be that just generally when teams get a new manager after they've been struggling, they do get that kind of immediate boost. Yeah, and I was reading something earlier today that Tuchel, you could see, even though they drew with Wolves yesterday, you could see that what Tuchel was wanting to do was already starting to kind of bed itself in. And I think Tuchel said, like, I expect my players to win the ball back within 4 or 5 seconds of losing it. So
I love that sort of mentality. Guardiola's got a similar one to that.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and it'll be interesting to see whether he's got the kind of player to do that, as in Lampard obviously brought those players in with a specific vision. Will they fit into that kind of high-pressure system that Tuchel wants? And I, again, from what I've read, Tuchel seems to be, he can potentially be a bit of a divisive character, which, if the dressing room is already a bit of a mess, as rumoured, is that going to make things worse? Who knows? I guess we'll just have to
be fair, though, going back to maybe, we don't know much about him and he isn't proven as such. Frank Lampard is far and away less qualified for that job than Tuchel. So,
absolutely.
In a sense, he's coached Derby to a failed playoff attempt and he got the job. But it's like, well, he's never actually done anything. So, I'm sure Tuchel is going to be an improvement. It just depends if that improvement's going to be enough to keep him in that job for more than 2 years, which is always seems to be quite hard at Chelsea.
2 years? Goodness, that's a long time for a Chelsea manager. Tried 2 months. There we are. I guess...
Go on. What
about
Lampard, though?
Yeah.
What do you think of it? Where do you think he's going to go? What do you think he's going to do? Do you think anybody will sign him?
I mean, I'm sure someone somewhere will want Frank Lampard, as in, you can't... I get what you're saying about, failed promotion attempt for Derby, but at the end of the day, you have to be a certain level just to get your team there. Like, let's not forget, Ian Holloway managed to get Blackpool into the Premier League, and he's been at multiple clubs since, So I would say, I think Lampard will get a job somewhere. Where that is, I have no idea. I guess time will tell. And, well...
that's fair.
And I don't know what you guys think as well. I think do you know what? I'm just thinking about this now. It's a bit of a tricky one because for a club that's kind of middle to bottom of the table, when you look at some of the
Lampard,
exactly. Yeah. When you look at some of the managers you've got down there, you've got Roy Hodgson, very experienced. Sam Allardyce, very experienced.
You'll have your Tony Pulis's there on occasion.
Yeah,
real stalwarts that know what they're doing with relegation.
Whereas Frank Lampard is, and this isn't a disservice to him, but obviously he's not that experienced. I
can't see any other Premier League top 6 club going for him. Arsenal, United, Liverpool, City, none of Spurs, none of them will want him.
I don't think at this point in time you'd imagine any of the top teams would want Frank Lampard. I mean. I don't know whether this is a little bit harsh on Lampard, but there was always an air of when he got the Chelsea job, it was because, he's a Chelsea legend. As simple as that. As in, don't get me wrong, he did an alright job at Derby County, but lots of managers do alright in the Championship. That doesn't mean they then, the following season, get to manage one of the biggest clubs in English Premier League football. So, those are my thoughts. I don't know what other people think.
I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get another job unless the England job goes in, because to be honest, nobody really wants the England job. It's it's the same with most international jobs.
With the greatest respect, it ended up with Gareth Southgate.
Yeah, and it's just you don't get any fluidity with an international job, and you can't stamp anything on them in a sense. It's just who have you got, what style of football do they play at the moment? Let's just try and mould it to that. Then you know what I mean. Like I don't think Giggs has gone into that Wales job and gone. Really and try to stamp anything on them because they're all from different clubs. But you know what I mean. You can't do that.
Frank will be united with his son Mason Mount.
I know. I can't see him getting a minute for them now. It's like he was literally Frank Lampard's child there, and it's just like he's gone now.
There we are. Okay, I guess we'll have to see how it pans out for Chelsea. It'll be an interesting one. Right. We'll move on to. Liverpool-Burnley from the weekend. Shock. If you haven't seen it, to be fair, it's Thursday by now. If you haven't seen it, then I guess you're kind of living under a rock a little bit. Lost to Burnley, 1-0. Penalty. Obviously, it was a penalty. No arguing with that. But bit of a difficult one for us Liverpool fans on this podcast right now. I mean. Liverpool are clearly in a bit of a rut. As we record this podcast, Liverpool will be playing Spurs in about an hour and a quarter. What were you saying before the podcast, Josh, about watching Liverpool? You watch and hope that it's going to turn around every time?
Yeah, I said I feel like I feel like a person at the moment who is addicted to cigarettes, and every cigarette you have, you tell yourself that it's going to be the last cigarette, but it never is, and you always take one more. At the moment, that's what it feels like to watch Liverpool. Every match that's coming up, I'm telling myself, this is where we have a bit of a turnaround in form.
Yeah.
And then each match, out of the last 5, has just got progressively more dour, I think. Apart, the United match, okay, I guess we weren't as poor as we've been against Southampton, but generally speaking, yeah, we are in a rut. Like we are in a we're in the nastiest stretch of form. Certainly, whether you count that first, 3/4 of a season Klopp had after Brendan Rodgers got sacked, I don't know, but since Klopp has been our manager from the start of the season, I think this is the roughest patch of form we've been in.
Yeah, I mean, he had that January as well, didn't he, in his first full season, where I think around Christmas time we were kind of in and around, like, I wouldn't say in a title race, but as in we were kind of third and second, and then it would be first, and
we just dropped right off, didn't we?
And then in January it dropped right off, and then by the end of the season it was like, right, we just need to get top 4. Which for where that team was at that point, I don't think that was unreasonable.
No, well, we'd finished 8th the season before, so finishing top 4 was a very good finish.
What do you think the problem actually is at Liverpool?
Well, I think that's I feel like that's the great question to be honest.
I've done a lot of thinking on this. I think it's an amalgamation of lots of problems. I don't think it's one thing. I think you've got a number of things going on. I think.
Well, should we discuss each one in turn rather than go all at once?
Yeah. Well, we could do. Some of them might not need too much discussing, see what we think. I mean, first one is injuries, and I think in short where Liverpool are at with injuries is that obviously you've lost Van Dijk for the season, you've lost Gomez for the season, and Jota has been out since November now. Amongst lots of other injuries, some longer term than others. When Van Dijk and Gomez initially got injured, it didn't hit us like most people would have expected it to hit us. But I think where we're at now, when you hit the fixture list of December, particularly December, but December through January, really that's a bit of a crunch period in the Premier League, isn't it? When other leagues are taking their 3-week or month-long break, the fixtures really pile up in the Premier League, and there's one after another. And Liverpool have hit that patch, and all of a sudden, having Fabinho, one of our best midfielders, at centre-back, is hurting us. And all of a sudden, putting Jordan Henderson in at centre-back is hurting us. And all of a sudden, Jota's goals are really badly being missed. I think that's one thing. You've got a few key injuries. I think.
Well, although you got to say though, even though it's hurting you having those guys play defence, defence isn't conceding many goals. It's more so that the attack isn't doing anything, wouldn't you more say?
Well, there is one thing I would say on that. I agree with you. I don't think you can put the problem solely on the defensive injuries, but I think if you look at the way that Liverpool play, one of the key factors is Trent and Robertson bombing up and down from wing back, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're Andrew Robertson or you're Trent Alexander-Arnold, you are going to play more freely, and you're going to think, right, I'm going to take more of a risk here if you've got Virgil van Dijk sitting behind you. When you've got Reece Williams sat behind you, with the greatest respect, there is that kind of, not necessarily, I'm going to be really defensive, but that kind of tentative, like, shall I hang back here a minute? I think that does have a massive influence on how Liverpool usually play and are playing right now. I think
that's that. Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
No, I was just going to say that's a very good point. And actually, if you look at Liverpool over the last 2 seasons, quite often that with Virgil van Dijk playing, Liverpool more often than not would leave themselves, one against one at the back. They, if the opposition have left, a winger and a striker up, Liverpool would quite often just leave Virgil van Dijk plus one at the back, and I think you lose that option. Van Dijk reads the game remarkably well, doesn't he? For all of his physical attributes, he's not one of those defenders who throws in last gasp tackles. No. He reads very well. He kind of, he positions himself to guide strikers and guide wingers where he wants them to go. He turns his body so that they stay outside, they don't cut in and shoot, so on. And when you lose that, I think it must, even though I'm sure Klopp is telling them to keep on playing the way they always play, it's got to lead to a bit of a, even if it's subconscious, a bit of a, taming
hesitation.
Yeah, definitely. A bit of a, trimming back of Trent and Robertson's attacking instincts. I think perhaps the bigger issue with Van Dijk, though, is I think what you see now, and I think you've always known it's the case, but you're seeing it now badly that we're missing him, is that Van Dijk is a big part of Liverpool's build-up play. Huge part of Liverpool's build-up play. So I think Jack's right. Strangely, we've done all right without him defensively. Like, defensively speaking, we've not been bad. Okay, there's been moments like Rhys Williams got shown up against United in the FA Cup, but Rhys Williams has generally gone very well. Fabinho has slotted in there incredibly well, considering his career at Monaco. He was playing left back, and then centre, defensive mid, and he slotted in well. But Van Dijk is such a big part of Liverpool's build-up play because he's very good with the ball at his feet, and so is Joe Gomez. Actually, I think Joe Gomez's weakness is when the ball is in the air, but with his feet, he's pretty strong. So I think that's where we seem to be missing those players most. Go on.
What surprises you?
The fact that having Henderson and Fabinho back there isn't as beneficial to the build-up play as having two centre-backs. I kind of assumed when you put two centre-mids in there, the build-up play might even be better, and they'd suffer on the defence side. It's surprising that it's been the opposite, I'd say.
But then, if you think about it, if you're a central midfielder playing at centre half, again, it's not a. I don't think there's a sense that Henderson can't pass as well as Van Dijk, or Fabinho isn't as good as Van Dijk in the air. But as in, you're out of position, you're probably having to think about things more than if you're playing in your natural position where things are just kind of instinct. Like you get the ball and you're already looking up. Like Henderson, for example, when he gets the ball, he may well, I don't know, he may well be looking at Salah or Mane immediately. As soon as he's at centre half, he probably gets the ball and thinks, right, I should probably do X rather than just going with his instinct. So, although I do get what you're saying, Jack, I think, ultimately, I think there is an impact on Liverpool losing those centre halves, but weirdly, it's not the fact that it's not like the floodgates have opened.
No.
Which, to be honest with you, when Van Dijk got injured, I perhaps I'm speaking for myself here, but I was a little bit worried. So you were like,
I was worried. I think every Liverpool fan would have been.
Yeah, and I think it's almost weird how even when you take into consideration the impact of losing them is going to have, you still look at it and you go, but hang on, we've still got Mane, Firmino and Salah up top and we're still struggling to score goals. Like, how does that work?
I'm going to come on to that now. The other issue with, like you say, Henderson at centre-half, he's gone pretty well, actually, but, Henderson's been at Liverpool 10 years, hasn't played centre-back before this season, so it isn't his position, and just because somebody has, just because someone's a good, good tackler in midfield, it doesn't all of a sudden make them a good centre-back if you just throw them in there. It's a completely different position, and yeah, I think that argument holds weight. The other thing is, Fabinho and Henderson have gone pretty well at centre-back, but the knock-on effect of that is that you haven't got them in your midfield. And for me, Liverpool's best midfield three is Fabinho, Thiago, Henderson. And you pick two of them out of midfield, and Fabinho breaks the game up, but he's also a distributor, and you pull him out of midfield, which means that Thiago really is playing Fabinho's role. Whereas if you have Fabinho there, you take some of the defensive responsibility off Thiago, And it's just the knock-on effect of how it hurts the team. You know, I think you pull Fabinho and Henderson out of that midfield, and all of a sudden you've got Oxlade-Chamberlain and Wijnaldum in there last match, and neither of them are particularly creative. Wijnaldum is a brilliant player, but he's not a creative player. And Oxlade-Chamberlain is a player I've always liked, and when Liverpool signed him, I remember being excited about the signing. But if there's ever been a criticism that has been levelled against Oxlade-Chamberlain, this is lack of end product, which is exactly what Liverpool is struggling with up the field at the moment. So,
and I think it's interesting as well, you know, as in you've got, if you look back to City last season, you know, they lost Laporte, didn't they? As he was injured. Fernandinho played a lot of the season at centre half. And one of City's biggest foibles last year was defence. They conceded a lot of goals. So like that for me was almost like a case study in you can play a centre half there, but ultimately there's a reason why central midfielders play in central midfield and why centre halves play at centre back. So I think basically if you're going to play Fabinho or Henderson as centre half for like one game or 2 games or even 3 games if you're really struggling, maybe. But I think when you're trying to go the course of a season, when you're having to play central midfielders, you know, as in, I read something earlier today because I think when the international break is coming up, the Brazilian FA have basically said that the players will have to isolate, which means that there's a potential that at some point Liverpool are going to have to play Jordan Henderson with Phillips or Reece Williams. Now, you know, that's horrendous. You know, like this is the team that won the league last year, and we're having to play our captain, central midfielder in defence, and then we're having to play one of 2 very inexperienced players.
Yeah,
but I think we should dissect what happened on the weekend, and then come back to the discussion about the underlying issues.
Okay.
How do people feel about that?
Yeah.
I'm quite enjoying the flow as we're going.
Alright, let's carry on then. Let's carry on.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't want to ruin the flow. Go on, Josh. You have
on
because
that,
you said you had other points.
Yeah, well, I think that kind of covers injuries, but go on, Jack.
Could I just... You were mentioning the wing-backs coming up a bit less and some issues around... can I just go back to that? Trent has had quite a few bad games. I mean, I don't know if you can see on our notes, I've put a little graph and it shows all of Trent's successful crosses. And I don't know how... He's got one successful cross, but I don't know how that's actually called a cross because it's backwards. But he's been really bad.
Trent has really struggled.
Do you not think, though, that... and you've made any... there's only been 4 signings in total across the January transfer window so far. Do you not think they should have gone... Let's get a bit of competition, bit of fresh blood.
Not necessarily in January, but I think absolutely that is one of the problems with Liverpool at the moment. Is that, and I think Josh has alluded to it already. You know, like I think what you're seeing now is actually, whereas before those kind of players, like for example Oxlade-Chamberlain, he was injured. There's nothing he can do about that. But that was a season ago now. Oxlade-Chamberlain, we don't really see much of him. Naby Keita is good but gets injured and then he's in and out of the team.
Naby Keita and Joel Matip are similar, aren't they, on that front?
Yes, yeah.
Can't get a run of games together.
I think what you're seeing now is that whereas before those kind of players were almost not hidden by the success, but as in the spotlight was off them because the first team was doing so well, really what Liverpool could do with now is Klopp saying, right, you're not playing well, let's put you in. Like, for example, Trent, you're struggling at the moment, let's put right back X in and let him play for a couple of games, take the spotlight off Trent, make Trent realise... I'm not saying that this is how he behaves, but as in Trent then has to think, right, I've got to play for my position now, and then that kind of sparks a bit more of a burst of form.
But do you think he tried to do that? Because he benched Salah and Firmino for the game, and I don't know if that was due to the form or due to fitness, but if it was due to fitness, that's kind of his own making because of the decision to play them in the FA Cup against Villa's youth team.
I don't like that line of... I don't like that argument because...
Liverpool needed a win against Villa. Well, that's the first thing you've got to bear in mind. Is that when
Villa's youth team.
Yeah, but let's be real, Jack. If Jurgen Klopp had gone and played his youth team, people would go, oh, you're disrespecting the cup.
No,
because they did it.
I
They
think...
did it last season. They did it.
No,
last
I understand.
Season.
Yeah, I understand that, and I know they did get a bit of flack for it. But in that situation, you could almost understand it a bit more because they were going for something.
No.
Because
Because
this year,
it's
like
like
all the problems they've got, I don't feel like anyone would have gone, that's outrageous what they're doing. Because I think
they would,
under
though.
the circumstances, it's a lot more understandable.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
I'm
think
sure
so.
I'm sure Liverpool didn't know the whole week that Villa were going to put out their youth team. So I'm sure Liverpool
It was
go
the
in with a
COVID,
plan.
wasn't it? It was because Villa had a couple of games cancelled in the Premier League.
Yeah, but it
just before
was only the day of that they found out that they were actually playing.
If
Well,
not,
you can't
maybe the day before, but it was no
Yeah.
earlier than that.
But as in your preparations
don't-
were already set in place at that point.
Yeah, and ultimately, at that level, we don't want to spend long on this. This is a complete, side issue. But at that level, when you've lost, Liverpool have gone 3 games without a win already
You need a
going
win.
into that Villa
You need a
match.
win.
You get a win, yeah. And if you have to beat a bunch of youth players to do it, you beat a bunch of youth players to do it. Last season, completely opposite circumstances. Liverpool Capital won against Villa, actually. That's the irony. Liverpool really didn't need to win their Capital One Cup tie. Carabao Cup, sorry, I don't know why I'm calling it Capital One. They didn't need to win their Carabao Cup tie against Villa, so they send their youth players. And it's just situational, isn't it? But, Liverpool needed and wanted a win. Back to the fringe players, the Oxlade-Chamberlains, the Origis, the Minaminos. I think what we've seen with them is that when the team was playing well last season, they were more than capable of coming in and playing
Doing a
well
job for 10 minutes.
and filling the role. But I think what you're seeing with, maybe I'm tarring Oxlade-Chamberlain unfairly here, but definitely the Origis of this world. Like,
Yes.
the vast majority of Liverpool fans who I know, when you mention Divock Origi, he needs to go now. And I think what you've seen with those types of players is coming into a winning team, they look good and they play well. Liverpool beat Everton convincingly at Anfield last year. What was it? 4? Can't remember the score. But it was around Christmas time, and goal scorers Xherdan Shaqiri, Divock Origi. Whereas I think what you're seeing now, the Divock Origis of this world are not going to come into a team and add impetus. A team that's struggling, a team that's out of form. No. They're not the types of players you can turn to and throw on, and they're going to start turning your form around. Whereas, I'm using Man City as an example. If you look at some of the players they've got to interchange in their front three, they are the types of players who are going to add impetus, like bringing in Mahrez or,
Bernardo Silva.
Yeah. So I think that's
Foden.
I think that's what we've learned about Liverpool's fringe players, and that's a general point, but I think it applies to most of them.
Yeah.
Back to Trent. This was the second point I was going to make, about the question, what's going wrong at Liverpool. Issue number 1 is the injuries and the knock-on effect of them. It's not excuses, and I don't think Liverpool have made excuses, really. I think, it's the knock-on effect on how the team
I don't think
rolls,
excuses are a bad thing. I know, obviously, I don't want to make excuses for something, but I don't think excuses are a bad thing. I think they're a good thing. I mean, I think Liverpool fans could genuinely look at that and go, we actually genuinely have an excuse that we've had all these injuries.
Yeah.
Or players are playing. I thought that it is a valid excuse.
Maybe we should do it a bit more. I think the point I was making about Henderson and Fabinho is that whilst they've done okay at centre-back, you're going into the Manchester United at home. It's a huge match because United are on a run. The winner out of the two goes top. And you're starting with Henderson and Fabinho at centre-back. Okay, they played pretty well by and large, but the flip side for Man United would be, you're going in at, Anfield, Liverpool, huge match. Who are your centre-halves? Fred and McTominay. You don't want it. You want your centre-backs playing at centre-back. So,
No, I completely agree. But the thing is, United do have other centre-backs, which is kind of where that whole foresight of why... I still don't understand why Liverpool's board haven't bought players, if I'm honest.
Well, with hindsight, we've needed to replace Lovren, didn't we?
Yeah.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Van Dijk has
But
barely
not just
missed a
that.
match
If anything,
in 2
you needed
years.
an additional one after last year. But they've actually gone the opposite and got rid of one, which just baffles me. Look, obviously this is hindsight, but I think any club shouldn't go into a Premier League season with just 4 centre-backs that you're comfortable with.
No.
I agree.
And I think this is kind of... What we're seeing now is, whereas before, the form and, winning the Premier League, the Champions League the season before, all of these little, not cracks, but all of these little areas of weakness, then we'll call them, were covered up, and you didn't see them. Whereas all of a sudden now, things aren't quite going our way, and like as Liverpool fans, you look at it and go, well, hang on, where's the alternative? You know, we've got an excellent starting team, but after that, you know, where is the alternative to Joe Gomez? You know, again, granted,
Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Exactly.
There's no alter. You know, I know Nico Williams has come through and done okay at points last season. He's also got, you know, quite badly criticised, probably slightly unfairly, but there's not enough depth there. And this was the second point after the injuries was that, unfortunately for Klopp, at the same time that we've got a load of injuries, at the same time where, you know, the fixtures have really built up, and, you know, this is where title challenges can be made or broken, you know, established players badly out of form. Chief of which is Trent Alexander-Arnold, and you know, top quality players don't become bad players overnight. Trent Alexander-Arnold is not a bad player. Trent Alexander-Arnold is a very good player playing very badly right now.
Yes.
Yeah, he's out of form, but his class is permanent.
Absolutely.
And in a sense, Rooney had the similar stage at United, and you just got to play them through it sometimes, and at some point he'll come through the other side.
Yeah.
But
and I can't remember whether I pulled this stat out the last time we were on the podcast, but I think I did actually. Against Southampton, Trent Alexander-Arnold gave the ball away 38 times. No, was it more?
Yeah, no, it was right.
Either way, it was the
38.
most in a single game, wasn't it?
It was the most in the single game in the whole of the Premier League season, and Klopp pulled him off 15 minutes before the end. So I remember saying exactly this. 38 times he gave the ball away in about 75 minutes. So he's given the ball away every 2 minutes in that match. So you've got good players in bad form. Firmino is another one. Firmino is not a bad player. Firmino has never been a goal scorer, an out-and-out goal scorer. Firmino is a very good player who is not playing well. Simple. Sadio Mane, who was on fire for the whole of last season. A lot of Liverpool fans would say that Sadio Mane was our best player last season. Hasn't hit anywhere near that form over the last 2 or 3 months. Possibly not all season. Okay, I know Salah banged in 2 against United in the FA Cup, but prior to that, Salah had been quiet for quite a few games running after one another. So you've got established players not playing well.
It's the perfect storm, basically, isn't it?
Yeah,
the perfect storm.
You've got injuries, you've got established players not playing well, you've got fringe players who aren't stepping up when they're asked to, you've got a fixture build-up, and the last thing I'd say, well, I say fixture build-up. Fixtures are built up for Liverpool just like they're built up for anybody else, but I think it hurts you disproportionately when you're carrying a few big injuries. The last thing I was going to say was, I do think that, back to what I said last summer, teams are increasingly playing a low block against Liverpool and doing a very good job of it. Like Burnley actually came to Anfield last season and played pretty well against us, and we got a draw, but Burnley came potentially closest to beating us at Anfield last season. And then they came this season and they did it. And if you look at the matches that we've played since the Crystal Palace demolition job, which was, 7-1? 7-0.
Yeah.
7-0.
That was a 7-1. I can't remember.
Absolutely destroyed them. And then there was a 9-day gap between that match and Liverpool's next match, which was West Brom. And our next match was West Brom. Sam Allardyce comes and plays a low block. Guess the result. We go to Newcastle. Steve Bruce, who's also, under pressure at Newcastle, plays a low block, gets a point. Then we go to Southampton. Trent makes a mistake early. Ings with a brilliant finish. We're 1-0 down inside 3 minutes. And Southampton just, shut us out. Then United come and do the same thing, even though I think United could have got a couple of goals in the second half, and even though I think, United were very conservative, but United defended us well. Liverpool had the vast majority of the ball, and United sit back and keep everything in front of them.
They did what they need to do.
And then Burnley do the same thing. So you've had 5 teams in a row now who've come and played a low block against us and done it very well, but possibly with the exception of Southampton.
Do you reckon it took inspiration from that Atletico Madrid
maybe
Champions League tie?
Probably.
I mean, I'm not saying dismantle, but they really... That was the first time last season that anyone went, whoa, like a team twice has played Liverpool and sort of beaten them over the 90 minutes in terms of attacking.
Absolutely.
And, back in the summer, this was why I was, hoping that Liverpool would sign Thiago, because, my thoughts back then were he's the man to unpick. And I still think that's true, but I don't think that's true.
Defensive midfield.
Yeah, I don't think that's true from defensive midfield when he's playing with Wijnaldum and Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think that probably is much more likely to be the case when he's playing a little bit further up the pitch with Fabinho behind him and Henderson beside him.
On that note then, kind of moving on from there, do you think... Because I guess the thing that is... there are lots of factors, aren't there? You got injuries, like you said, you've got not necessarily a fixture pile-up compared to everyone else, but as in just generally more condensed fixture list when you're struggling for form and you have got injuries. But then you've got players who just generally aren't playing well. And I don't know about you, this is possibly... You look at Liverpool right now, and I think the only thing you can say to explain it is that there's multiple things happening at once that are causing this. But do you think there's perhaps as in football tends to go through cycles, doesn't it? As in, like Real Madrid's win the Champions League 3 years in a row. Ronaldo leaves, and they've never been the same since. United, perfect example. United won, everything for donkeys. Ferguson leaves, and they've not really won a massive amount since. They've won the odd FA Cup or whatever. Liverpool now, they came runners up in the Premier League by a point, and had 98 points, something ridiculous like that, or 100 points. I don't know, I can't remember.
98 when they were runners up.
Yeah, no one's hit triple digits yet, have they?
Yeah, there we go. So it was
runners up with 98, winners with 99.
Yeah, and they also won the Champions League. They won the Club World Cup. They won the Super Cup. Is there now a point where you have to look at Liverpool and go, right, they need a bit of a freshen up? Not necessarily, sell everyone, buy a whole new team, but is there an argument for, if, for example, a good bid came in for Salah, over 100 million, do Liverpool look at it and go, well, it's a lot of money, that can be reinvested in younger, like, for example, Haaland? Could that money be reinvested and kind of revitalised? Because these Liverpool players now, when you think about it, okay, they've only won one Champions League and they've won one Premier League, but as in for players who are in their 30s, they probably look like James Milner, for example. He's won everything there is to win. He's won multiple Premier League titles. He's won the Champions League with Liverpool. Does it get to a point where you go, right, we need to cut our losses and kind of start to have a bit of a reboot?
No, well, not on James Milner. But yes.
How dare you say James Milner?
No, James Milner. James Milner can still be in that dressing room at 40 if he wants to be. But no, I absolutely agree. I think, like you say, it's not a rebuild. Liverpool don't need a rebuild. Liverpool need to freshen up. And it's not the same thing. Liverpool's players haven't become bad players overnight. But if you look at it, and again, I think we discussed this on the podcast. If you look back to United's period of dominance under Sir Alex Ferguson, I think Jack Freeman, I think you said this. I think there was only once in the whole period that they won. Did they ever win 3 Premier Leagues in a row?
Yeah, I think they did it once.
There we go. But more
maybe
often
even
than
twice.
not,
But if they did it twice, it was early 2000s.
More often than not, you're doing. I think it probably was once, because early 2000s, I don't think they did it. They won the Premier League in 2000.
The thing is, it was always it was either just 2, then they'd lose 1, then 2, then...
Yeah.
They definitely got 3 once. I couldn't remember if they did it twice or not. But go on.
But more often, the trend throughout Sir Alex Ferguson's period in charge of Man United is they'd win the league title and then someone would topple them. They'd come back and they'd win a couple and then someone would topple them. I don't mean topple, but beat them.
Yeah, not even,
But what Sir Alex Ferguson did incredibly well at Man United was to keep the wheel spinning. So
he almost adapted to whatever the new trend was.
Absolutely.
How do we beat it?
And that's where Klopp is at Liverpool now. Jurgen Klopp is... I still think he's the best club manager in the world. And when Liverpool got him, I thought that at the time. And throughout Klopp's period in charge of Liverpool, every once in a while you have to pinch yourself and think, God, yeah, Jurgen Klopp's our manager. He's a superb manager. But where he's got to now, Jurgen Klopp has been building this side as we know it now since he started at Liverpool. The initial clear out of players that weren't going to take us anywhere near a league title.
That's nearly 4 years now, isn't it?
5 years.
5 years. There you go.
Yeah. So Jurgen Klopp now is at the point where this team needs freshening up, and that's the way that things go in football. How different is what's happening to Liverpool this season to what happened to City last season? City, had won 2 league titles in a row, one of them with a records point total, and then last season they were dropping points left, right, and centre, and they didn't. I don't know what the gap was in the end, but at the point when Liverpool won the league title, you're talking well over 25 points. 20 points, I don't know. But, but then, what does Guardiola do? He tweaks, he invests, he brings in Ruben Diaz, and their problem position was centre-back last year when they lost Laporte. Yeah. And all of a sudden, City are looking like they could go and win it again.
They've won 11 on the bounce, haven't they?
Yeah, and, Liverpool, are further down the league table than City were, but they're not further away from top. Liverpool are only 7 points away from top. City were 20, 24, 25 points off top. So, it's not a wholesale rebuild that's needed. It's that things need to be freshened up. Now, like you mentioned, Haaland, if I'm, as a Liverpool fan, I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't Liverpool go for somebody like him in the summer? He's got a release clause at 65 million. Liverpool lack an out-and-out goal scorer. Why not invest? And, I think it's just that Liverpool are at that stage where, the fringe players were no different last season, but they weren't being found out last season.
We didn't need them. It's as simple as that. Last season, when you've got Salah and Mane in the form of their lives, banging goals, and you've got Van Dijk, who's a rock at the back. Well, I say that, we weren't even particularly good defensively last year. But then, we're churning out results, and you don't need
I think we were pretty good
to get you a goal, or Origi to come on and get you a goal. What do you say, sorry, Josh?
I think we were pretty good defensively.
Well, yes, we were good, but you're not needing them to come on and get you a goal. You're needing them to come on for the last 10 minutes and give your starting player a break. But that's what you're needing them for.
Or fill in for a match when Sadio Mane's going to bang in a couple anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas now we're kind of turning to them when Mane's not scoring goals, and you turn into Minamino or Origi. I think, to be honest, Minamino's been quite hardly done by. But as in you turn into Origi and you're like, Origi's not going to get you. He's not the same level. It's as simple as that. But yeah, no, I think the idea, like you said, we don't need a full on rebuild. But I think there's probably a few players there that their time has come to leave the club, as it happens in football, And I think there's just a bit of investment needed. I think it's as simple as that. As in like this Liverpool team, the Liverpool team that won the Champions League nearly 3 years ago now. Is it 3 years?
2.
No, 2 years. The Liverpool team that won the Champions League 2 years ago is basically the same team, apart from Fabinho and Jota. That's probably about it. And it's the same team. So Fabinho was at Liverpool when we won the Champions League. Oh, there you go. There you go. You got Fabinho. So Jota is the only really big addition to Liverpool.
The only potential starters are Thiago and Jota, aren't they? Liverpool have bought in Minamino since, but no, you're talking Thiago for a cut price deal in the summer, and Jota are the only two really that have changed. Well,
and Gomez has come in, sort of, because Lovren was the starter back then, wasn't he?
No, it was Gomez. By that point, it was Joe Gomez.
I thought that was Lovren's golden year, where he made the World Cup final and the Champions League final. But I might be wrong there.
I'd argue that this team would look very much the same even the season before that, Jack. You're right.
When we lost the Champions League, you're right.
When we lost the Champions League final, the only differences from there are
Fabinho and Alisson.
Yeah, Alisson's the big one, the goalkeeper. But apart from that, the outfield team is much the same. If you look at that team that started the Champions League final, you're talking Virgil van Dijk, and at that point it was Lovren, Robertson and Trent.
Wasn't Joe Gomez injured at that point?
I can't remember. I don't know whether he'd fully broken in at that point. But yeah, so you're going back. So that is 3 years ago. And you're looking at the team and you're putting your finger on goalkeeper and saying, okay, they've invested big there and that's changed. But elsewhere, it hasn't really. So yeah, I think it is time to freshen up. And I think that might mean clearing out some fringe players or clearing out some players that, potentially at the end of their journey with Liverpool. Like Wijnaldum is rumoured that he wants out and he's not going to sign a new contract. I love Wijnaldum, but he might be one of those players who,
Come
has
to the end of a cycle.
Yeah, and Liverpool just need to. Thankfully, because Klopp, you'd have to be, I think you'd have to be pretty blind to say that the team that Klopp has built isn't good. Like Klopp has built a good side, and I think even a football fan of another club, like I, as a Liverpool fan, I'd look at City's team and say, City have got talent there that any club in the world would want. Thankfully, Klopp has built a really good side, so it's not a wholesale change that is needed. It is just, bringing in more depth at somewhere like right back, bringing in another centre back, tweak here, tweak there. If Wijnaldum's going to go, potentially bring in another midfielder, possibly someone with a bit more creativity, But I think that's what's needed. But whether that's needed, I think that's a summer job. In this January transfer window, I don't think Liverpool will end up picking anybody up. But at this stage, if you were to ask me what would you want, I think if we could bring in a centre-back this transfer window, I would. But I think the other issues are probably end of season over the summer issues. But
yeah, I agree. I feel like me and Josh have said quite a lot from a Liverpool fan's perspective. I don't know whether you want to say anything, Jack, quickly before we perhaps move on a little bit.
Few things.
Oh, here we go.
Do you genuinely think Salah would merit over £100 million value?
Yes.
Yeah, on numbers alone.
Really?
On numbers. Jack, he's a top goal scorer right now in the Premier League.
Yeah. On numbers alone.
But those triple-digit figures are usually reserved for players who are at the start of their careers.
If we can get 145 million for Felipe Coutinho, we can get over 100 million for Mo Salah. It's as simple as that.
That's a pretty young Coutinho. I think that's my...
Yeah, but it's a player who's not as good. It's as simple as that. Mo Salah...
I don't know, at the time, he was pretty good. I know he was bad the season we sold him. He was the Liverpool's player.
Yeah, but not as good as Salah's been. Like, let's not forget, Mo Salah scored the most goals that's ever been scored in a single season. He then went on the following season and scored a load of goals and won the Champions League. He then went on the following season, scored a load of goals and won the Premier League. Coutinho and Salah on... Yeah, and you just got to look at where Coutinho's ended up.
Yeah, and the perfect example would be Eden Hazard, who left Chelsea for Real Madrid last season at 29. Yeah. Now, that was for, I think, 89 million pounds, so it wasn't quite the 100 mark. And whilst numbers aren't everything, however, if you Salah's numbers blow Eden Hazard's out of the water, and that's not to take away from what Hazard gave to Chelsea, fantastic player. And, I don't think many people would have batted an eyelid too much at that price tag, but... Mo Salah, I love him as a Liverpool fan. He's one of those players who his numbers are just ridiculously good compared with what you see on the pitch. That's not. Yeah. He's most of the time he's brilliant on the pitch as well. But you watch Salah and then you think like his numbers are insane. Like how does he scores so many goals and and he gets assists as well. So
and there's another factor to this as well, in that financials aside, as in Barcelona, it's been reported in the past couple of days that Barcelona and Real Madrid financially are struggling big time, but they are also struggling on the pitch as well. So there's an element of which there's a potential that you're going to have some desperate buy-in at some point, and if you're Real Madrid and you're looking around the world of players, yes, there are some younger players, but then their price tags are going to be even higher again. So,
on the stat front of what you say, I understand you're saying he's got loads of great numbers, but that is a very attacking Liverpool side. Well, actually, the Chelsea sides over the years, for when you reference Hazard, they've always been pretty defensive. So, in a sense, his numbers won't shine as much as a player like Salah.
You say that, though, what you've got to remember is that was a very defensive side, but the focus of their attack was Eden Hazard. With Liverpool,
you could probably say the same about Salah, though, wouldn't you?
No, it's not, though, is it? Because
he kind of steals everything.
No, but if you think about it, you've got Mane on the other side, you've got Firmino through the middle. So all of a sudden, you've got all of those things are kind of just. I guess that kind of feeds into your point about defenders aren't able to kind of focus on one to defend against like they could with Hazard, for example. But as in, I feel like there's an element to which as well. you know, when, you know, it's not like Salah's a striker, for example. If Salah's a striker, he's getting everything fed to him. But as in, at the
I'm
end
not
of
sure. Sorry, go on.
Josh.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure that I would call Liverpool an overly attacking side. I'm not sure.
No, man, like last season, a few seasons, they do just the way they play. It's like similar to City in the sense that they don't just go for those 1-0ers or 2-0ers and then, you know, not part of the bus but defend. In the sense that they go for blood every time. They're always looking for your 5, your 6, your 7 goals.
That's true.
Whilst I don't feel like Chelsea were ever that sort of team that were, you know, really looking to humiliate the other team.
I think Chelsea are probably more defensive minded, but I do think that if you look back at last season, you know, it's got to be one of Liverpool's best seasons ever. You know, it's our best points total ever. But we did win an awful lot of games: 1-0, 2-1, 3-1.
Yeah.
Whereas
just look at United in January.
Whereas
United, was it 2-0? I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas you go back to, you know, Brendan Rodgers' season that he was in charge and we came second in the league. You know, that season Liverpool were ridiculous. Like we were winning 5-3, 5-4.
That's what I mean.
And
you were scoring loads of goals then, and you were still scoring lots of goals now, in a sense, which is why I was sort of going on to that.
Yeah, but, well, I think the point I was making was, you know, if you go back to that side that Rodgers was in charge of, well, I think it was just a very, very attacking side. And, you know, what lost us the title was the goals that we conceded. You know, you can't win a title hoping to, you know, there'll be matches where you'll concede 3 and that season we had Sterling, Sturridge and Suarez up top, didn't we? And, you know, there'll be matches where they'll bang in 5 or 6, but on those days where they're not quite clicking, you need to not concede 3. And that's what cost Liverpool that title. Whereas I think this Liverpool team, definitely more attacking than the team that Eden Hazard was part of at Chelsea. But I don't think I don't think people will necessarily look back in history and say, oh, you know, that Liverpool side was one of the most attacking sides ever. I don't think it necessarily is. But yeah, having said that, you know, Salah's numbers are so far out of proportion with what Hazard gave Chelsea. I don't think it can just be put down to that either.
Yeah. Okay. To be fair though, and no doubt I do think that Salah is better than Hazard. I'm not saying anything other than that, but I was just saying in the sense that his numbers were inflated by the fact that the sort of team he was playing for. That was just
look, the thing is, you know, the transfer market is so volatile as well, isn't it? As in, you know, it's all well and good saying based on the statistics, but certain teams may look at it and go, oh yeah, well he's this old, so we're not going to pay as much for him. So you know, it does kind of balance out. But I guess what I'm saying is, if a large amount of money came in for Salah, then maybe not 100 million, but if it was like 80 million, for example, do you start to kind of... Whereas perhaps last season you would have gone, no, absolutely not. Do you now kind of look at it and go, ooh, you know, what's the alternative kind of thing?
And you did mention Haaland earlier, and I did just want to sort of alternate. Was Liverpool don't buy big money acquisitions in a sense?
No, we haven't done.
Like,
you're right.
Classically, you just get your 30 to 40 mil guy. You know, Haaland's going to be an over £100 million player without a shadow of a doubt. So yeah, I don't know if Liverpool would actually get him purely because the way they run, they don't tend to do that sort of money signing.
They'd have to change their tack, wouldn't they? And I guess you've got to remember, you know, like they paid 70-odd million for Van Dijk, they paid 67 million for Alisson, and those have worked out, so perhaps they will be...
No, you
are right, though, as in generally we haven't done that in the past.
Yeah, what Liverpool have done... When you say Liverpool don't go big, generally, that's absolutely right, Liverpool don't go big. I think if you go back to when, you know, Liverpool were managed by Brendan Rodgers, I think that comes down to Liverpool wouldn't have attracted that type of talent at that point anyway. Just because of, I know we finished second in that second season under Rodgers, but generally speaking, where Liverpool were on the curve, you know, you're nowhere near really the top, you know, band of clubs. You know, that season that we nearly won the league under Rodgers, we went in the Champions League. The following season, we got into the Champions League and got knocked out in the group stages anyway. So that, you know, then you come on to Klopp as manager, and you know, since the beginning, well, since FSG took over, the blueprint has been sign. You know, if not youth, but relatively young players who have got the best of their career well ahead of them, who you think you can develop and you think you can mould into this, you know, this kind of mindset. They don't sign
young players to sell on, like Chelsea. They buy young players because they're cheap and they know they can make them good, like you were saying, moulding them.
Absolutely.
Which does make more sense, really.
But I think what you've seen happen is that it started three summers ago now, where, well, not 3 summers ago, just over 3 years ago, where, you know, that worked to a point, and then since then Liverpool have kind of just gone in and got that one big player that they need. So, you know, okay, Klopp has built the core of the team fairly cheaply, bringing in, you know, like, okay, Wijnaldum was 25 million, Shaqiri 13 million, and, you know, okay, Firmino was a Rodgers signing, but, you know, at the time Mane was less than, you know, 40 million, Salah was just over, which you look at their value now, it's nothing close to what they've become. But when Klopp has wanted to go big to get that player he wants, the owners have allowed him and the owners have supported him. So 75 million for Van Dijk, over 60 for Alisson, over 50 for Fabinho. So, you know, Liverpool haven't got an out-and-out goal scorer. If there's a position that Liverpool need to go out and, you know, jab into the transfer market and spend that 70 million to get a good one, well, now's the time. We did it at centre-half with Van Dijk because, you know, you going back, you know, 15 or 20 years, Liverpool's biggest issue was at centre-back. So Liverpool go in, 75 million, and get the best that there is. And, you know, if Haaland's release clause is 65 million, which is what it's rumoured to be, well, why not? And again, you're coming off the back of what have Liverpool spent in the last 2 years? 7 million on Minamino. I think the Thiago deal will go up to 25, and Jota was 45. And that's
I don't know. It's probably 45.
And that's going back to, well, that's going back 2 years at least. So you know, it's not a lot when, like I say, the contrast is Chelsea go out and spend 200 million in one summer. So yeah, we'll see. The blueprint is that, you know, he hasn't gone out and spent loads and loads and loads on players, but yeah, I think the time is to potentially make those, you know, targeted approaches in the transfer market.
There we are. Yeah. Shall we move on from Liverpool? That was a solid discussion on Liverpool. Although I think, you know, a lot of what we said is quite interesting, even if you're not a Liverpool fan. You know, perhaps teams who people who supporters of teams who are going through rebuilds know that or reboots or refreshes or whatever the heck you want to go. It will perhaps agree or disagree with what you're saying. If you do, perhaps just put a comment down below. If you're on YouTube, let us know what you think.
Well, I mean, I know we've gone into depth because there's 2 Liverpool fans on the podcast, but
yes,
equally, you know, Liverpool are the reigning champions, and they are down, you know, potentially when games in hand are being played, they are going to be down in 5th or 6th. So, you know, if it was City, then people would be talking about that, wouldn't they? So
yeah, absolutely. Right, should we do our highlight of the week?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I don't mind really. Do you want?
Yours is the topical one, Jack Freeman, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My highlight of the week was Burnley beating Liverpool.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Despite the fact I just said, we'll move on from Liverpool.
Yeah. I was absolutely ecstatic. I honestly, it's just been so long. I was fed up of that really long home record you had. I was fed up of any sort. I really just wanted you to crumble in one game, and it just happened in that one game. I know obviously you're going to come back, but it was nice to see Burnley beat you. It was.
I mean, without wanting to sound sour grapes, I would hardly call a 1-0 loss to Burnley crumbling, but carry on.
I just liked it. It was almost like you've had such a long period of not winning, and it was just like, creme de la creme to lose the home record. I was like, it was bliss, it was.
There we are. Right, I'll do my highlight of the week next then, because mine's a neutral one. And my highlight of the week was, I think it was from earlier, towards the end of last week actually. Newport County's goalkeeper scored a goal from his own 5-yard box, which means...
It was a goal kick.
It was a goal kick, so it was 96 metres. And that is a new Guinness World Record for the longest distance for a goal.
That is nuts.
And that happened down the road in Newport.
Yeah. Not far from us.
There we are. That's my highlight of the week. Right, we'll go to the Liverpudlian side of the highlight of the week now, Josh.
My highlight of the week was Man United losing at home 2-1 to Sheffield United.
Shock.
And whilst Man United's home record is nothing like Liverpool's, Liverpool were 68 games unbeaten. Man United have lost 4 at Old Trafford this season. My reasoning is simply this: I work with a band of United fans, and
I feel like when you said band, then there was some real band of United fans. Some real hatred in that.
The amount of stick that I have taken on the WhatsApp over the last few months has just been ridiculous, and just like memes of Sean Dyche with his thumbs up and like a big gurney grin, but also United fans go. I've actually heard United fans saying we're gonna win the league. So
I've said that.
It was just
obviously tongue in cheek, but
it was just needed at this moment in time. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden United are going to go down the table like a stone. United are still ahead of us, but after the last 2 months, that's nothing to shout about the form we're in. But it was just a little reminder to United fans: this is where you are at. In that United.
Well, this is where the league is at as well. As in, it's the league this season. The quality is significantly dropped, I think.
Yeah, and United have been on a good run of form, and United have made progress under Solskjaer this season.
Absolutely.
That is clear, and United aren't going to be miles and miles back from City, even when it's going to be a 4 or 5 point gap now, when City have probably won their game in hand. But United, I'm not going to go into too much depth because I've got a stat on this later. But United haven't been setting the world alight in terms of form. And whilst these things even themselves out over a couple of seasons, potentially over one season, United have had a couple of favourable penalty shouts, a couple of things that have gone their way, and that's kind of helped them to keep that run going. And I think their luck almost ran out, I guess, against Sheffield United, and of course the other thing here is that Sheffield United have only won one Premier League match before this weekend. So it was just a little bit of a reminder. Look, not everything is rosy at United just because Liverpool is struggling, and just because everybody else at the top is struggling a little bit, apart from City probably.
Yeah, there we are. Right, so there are highlights of the week. You can tell who the Liverpool fans and the United fans are. We'll move into European football next, shall we? Jack, you put an interesting thing about... I mentioned Real Madrid earlier. Mr. Sergio Ramos.
Sergio Ramos wants to stay at Madrid, imagine for the rest of his career. They're not really the sort of team to do that, in a sense, because they don't really care for loyalty. I mean, they ditched Casillas. They've sold Ronaldo. I think they're more the sort of team who just consistently buy, and they're happy just to get rid of the old guys whenever they want to. But Sergio Ramos wants to stay there for the remainder of his career. He said apparently he wants a 2-year, €12 million contract. That's about £100,000 a week. That, and people think he's money grabbing in a sense, because when you get to that sort of older age, I mean, they especially see it in the NFL, people want almost like a 3 or 4 year contract because there's quite a high chance they'll get injured or they may go out of form. So they always ask for sort of prolonged one at a decent rate. But even to sort of squash that, he said he'll delay the payments for 2 years. I just kind of thought it's a bit of an interesting one that, he is kind of Mr. Real Madrid. He's got tattoos of victories he's been a part of at Madrid on his body, and it's like, would you have him at Liverpool?
No.
It's a class signing that.
I would say in some ways yes, but in most ways no, because firstly his wages are quite high relative to his age. Secondly, I feel like Ramos and Salah probably wouldn't get on particularly well.
But he didn't intend to injure him there. Just an
100%. 100%.
Meant to.
100%.
He judo threw him to the ground. Anyway, besides that point, I don't think Liverpool would go for that sort of... I think the owners would rather say, we'll just wait until we can get someone who we really want, rather than just getting the best of what's out there kind of thing.
Thirdly, discipline.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't dislike Ramos as a player, and I certainly don't level anything against him after what he's achieved in the game. But yeah, discipline's an issue, always has been.
And when you're signing a centre half because your two other centre halves are injured, the last thing you want is that centre half to then get banned.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of defeats the purpose. But I get what you're saying though, Jack. As in, he's a very, very good player. As in,
I just thought he could be what you need to patch it
to
up
be honest
and
with you,
be the experience.
I wouldn't be surprised if United snapped him up. In all honesty, you know, as in, and that's not to that's not to discredit your current centre halves, but as in, with the greatest respect, Sergio Ramos is a serial Champions League winner, and
you know what? If we were in the Champions League,
but is he better than Harry Maguire?
Oh,
I silenced the podcast.
I was going to say, I don't know about that.
Shots fired! Shots fired! There was a little silence there where you said that, Josh. It was like, oh no, what's he said now?
Back to the point that you were making, Jack Freeman, actually, about the types of signings Liverpool make. Sergio Ramos is the complete opposite. That would be so out of character for Liverpool to make that type of signing.
You're right.
I just don't think it would
Not
ever
even
happen.
like on a 6-month contract, just to get to the end of the season. You wouldn't even want that.
It's not what Liverpool would do. I don't think.
Fair enough.
I think we'd sooner sign nobody and keep on playing Nat Phillips and Reece Williams, to be honest.
Yeah,
All right.
I think we would. Because I said this to you, didn't I, Josh? Interestingly, in a slightly different vein of thinking, when at the point where it was kind of like, we're struggling to score goals, I was like, why do we? Diego Costa's just been released from his Atletico contract. Why don't we get him in? He can bang in a few goals for us. And you were like, no, just no. He's in more trouble than he's worth.
Fair enough.
There we are. City game. City versus Villa. Another slightly controversial offside. They had one against... Who was it before? They had one.
I can't remember the other one.
Didn't someone come from an offside position? Was it...
Well, that was this one. This was the Gundogan one. Yeah, it was against Villa.
Oh, yes, but it wasn't Gundogan who was offside, was it?
No, I thought it was him, and then Bernardo Silva went on to score.
Oh, maybe, I don't know. There's been so many offside controversies. Anyway,
so many goals for them.
Yes, no, it was this one because I remember it being Tyrone Mings. You're right. You are right.
Yeah.
Go on.
Bizarre though, wasn't it?
Yeah, very.
It was just so bizarre.
Very, very. Well, and it's weird. I don't know whether perhaps because VAR is now a thing, but in the past these sort of things would have just been written off as it happens. Whereas now, because there's VAR, it's almost like there's no excuse.
Well, the thing is, they followed the rules.
Yes,
but
they did.
Almost, it's like this rule. I think everybody kind of knew it, but nobody thought you'd ever enforce it in such an absolutely ridiculous manner. It's like if Tyrone Mings had turned around and passed that ball to the goalkeeper, and Gundogan just gets it and goes, "Great, thanks very much. I'll go score." You go, "That's Tyrone Mings' fault." But Tyrone Mings can see Gundogan running towards him, or he's very aware that it's happening. So he sort of, on the turn, tries to do a pass with his weaker foot to his fellow centre-back to quickly get out of trouble in case Gundogan intercepts. And they go, well, he's played the ball, so Gundogan's now onside. It's like, the only reason he's playing the ball is because Gundogan's running at him. It's like, and it's very convenient that it's City who get this benefit against a team like Villa who... have been pretty tricky to beat for the bigger teams this season. It's coming just at the right time for them. When they were 0-0 as well, quite late on in that game. So it just seemed a bit of a farce to me.
Oh, I don't know about you, Josh, but I can taste a bit of salt in my mouth there. Can you?
Honestly, I don't really care about it from the United's point of view because I don't genuinely think we're going to win the league.
I'm joking. I winded you up, but you are right.
I know that.
As in,
it's classic that it's a top 3 side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, in the league, and it's like. People always complain about the decisions going their way. And I've always sort of been in the mindset of, well, decisions are going to go their way if they have more of the decisions, going for them. And it's, what I mean? If you're the more attacking team, you're always going to have more decisions go your way.
But that's kind of come from
it just
nothing,
lends
isn't
itself. Yeah, but ones like this, it's like you can't really defend it and say, oh, well, it's because City are the more attacking side. Because he's just blatantly run offside and come all the way back from... this wasn't just offside. This was about 10, 15 yards offside. It wasn't even close. It was just nonsense, I think.
Well, and the thing is as well, you kind of look at it and you're like, how has that happened? But in a weird way, it's good that it's happened with a big team because it brings attention to it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but as in, let's be fair, if that had happened with, say, Sheffield and I don't know, Fulham or West Brom, people would be like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. But because City have benefited from it, you kind of put the scope on it a bit more. But yeah, absolutely ridiculous. It's like you said, I guess it's one of those ones, because the situation very rarely arises, they've never really had to enforce it in that way. And now they have enforced it in that way. You're like, what? Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just absolute nonsense.
Just bonkers. Yeah. Absolutely bonkers. The next point... it did make me chuckle when I read this. Do you want to read the statement that Paul Merson said, Jack?
He said Klopp and Guardiola wouldn't be able to take Leicester to the top like Brendan Rodgers has. Now, I got a bit of a for and against for this one, because firstly, are Leicester really considered at the top? No. They're in the top 4, but they're as much in this amalgamation of teams as anybody else, and it's like I wouldn't. They're just in a better vein of form than some other teams at the moment, and that's the only reason you can really say they're in the top 4. So I don't think that really, that's always a debatable one. But do you reckon there's an element of truth to it in the sense that Klopp and Guardiola have only coached big teams, so? I've only really done it with big teams, or if they've done it with smaller ones, they didn't successfully do it.
I kind of agree. I say kind of, just purely on the basis, like you said, purely on the basis that Guardiola hasn't managed a lower team. It's like a bit of an unknown, really, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I would say with Klopp is like, let's not forget that in his first season in charge, Klopp did finish 8th. So although the team, the club Liverpool wouldn't be considered a smaller club, is there not an element of, well, at the end of the day, he has taken a team from 8th. Like when Brendan Rodgers took over at Leicester, where were Leicester? Probably around
9th. I've just checked it out, and if you look at where Leicester have travelled under Rodgers, it's remarkably similar to where Liverpool travelled under Klopp. Liverpool went 8th, 4th twice in a row, 2nd, 1st. So there's just a steady rise there over a few seasons, but what you've got to bear in mind is...
Would you say that there's slightly different 8th and 9th in the sense of Liverpool probably have a little bit more financial backing than Leicester?
Yeah, I think they are slightly
different.
different.
There's a financial difference, absolutely.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think where you'll see the difference is where Liverpool have gone 8th, 4th, 2nd, 1st. I don't think Leicester are going to go 2nd, 1st. I know they won that season under Ranieri.
Yeah, that's a freak year, yeah.
But it was such a, it's a remarkable story. It's one of the best there's ever been in the Premier League. But yeah, therein lies the difference, and that's what I was saying earlier about Liverpool. Liverpool went 8th, 4th, and that's when the financial clout was brought to bear. Van Dijk, Alisson, Fabinho. Whereas Leicester are not going to go out and spend £65 million on a goalkeeper, £75 million on a centre half. So I think the start of what Rodgers has done at Leicester, from taking the finance out of it, where they were in the table, is remarkably similar to the first couple of seasons that Liverpool had under Klopp.
And I don't think it's any, it's not a negative against Brendan Rodgers. This isn't like a black mark to say that, as in to get Leicester into the position they are in. Like, let's not forget, last season, apart from like the last couple of games, the biggest talking point of the season, apart from Liverpool, being so far ahead, was who's going to get top 4, and the teams were Chelsea, United, Leicester. Yeah, so, it's remarkable what he's done, but I feel like...
I think Rodgers has done very, very well, hasn't he?
Yeah, and
Leicester, very well.
I agree with what you say as well, Jack, is like what you define as the top. Because, it's not like Leicester are romping away with the league, is it? And so... I feel like that's a bit of a mercenism there, as I like to call it.
We did sort of refer to it earlier in the sense that no relegation club's going to sign Frank Lampard because he's the wrong sort of manager for it. In the same sort of way, I don't think Guardiola or Klopp are really going to get signed by one of those middle-of-the-pack teams.
Well, if you think about it, like for me, if you look at Jose Mourinho, if ever there was a manager who had not lost his way, but had gone to the top and was kind of not quite at that level that he had been, it would be him. As in, he was at his peak at Chelsea, he was at his peak at Inter, he was at his peak at Real Madrid, he was at his peak at Chelsea. That second season at Chelsea, he got sacked. Then he joined United, for I think it was a season, and then the following season he got sacked, was it, or something like 3 seasons?
No, I think we gave him 3 years. We always give him 3, I think.
And then he got sacked. He's now ended up at Spurs. Well, you know, as in by the time you've been sacked by Chelsea, sacked by United after poor performance, it's at that point then you kind of look at it and go, well, surely at that point he would kind of descend to a lower team in the table, would you not?
Yeah.
But I mean, it is slightly different with Mourinho because he's a serial winner Champions League, whereas, you know, like, Klopp has won the Premier League and the Champions League with Liverpool. It's impressive, but in terms of the quantity of silverware, it's not at the same level right now.
I feel like Mourinho does well at clubs which have got a bit more of a, just trying to think the right word to, but a bit more of a cult following from their local area in a sense. Like, you know, your Man Uniteds and your Chelseas, they're sort of supported a little bit more internationally, same as Real Madrid. But with Spurs and Inter Milan and Porto, they're all very similar clubs in the sense that they're all towards the top end of the league, but they're all sort of very well supported by their own nation or their own area. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does actually do quite well there. But yeah, I do get what your point is.
I mean,
if anything, there's almost a, not hierarchy, but a template of, if you were to be a championship club, you could almost go, I want Neil Warnock to get me promoted. I want Sam Allardyce to keep me in the Premier League.
Yes,
I then want Roy Hodgson to get me mid-table. Then I want Brendan Rodgers to get me towards the top. Then I want, somebody else to do the next. So it's almost like blank state, because there's certain managers that just do those jobs really well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, that's why I think West Brom is staying up, because Sam Allardyce does that job so well, and he will establish you. David Moyes is kind of doing what he used to do at Everton, now with West Ham, where he gets that sort of club up to that. But he's not going to take him any further. And the same way Everton now moved on, well, obviously that was because Moyes moved to United, and that failed. But, Everton have now gone on to an Ancelotti, who was going to get them in close to the top before. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, West Ham's a bit of a different kettle of fish than Everton, but it wouldn't surprise me in a couple of years you see, a decent manager go there and try and get them that extra step.
I think that's a really good point about certain managers suiting certain teams, and you pick Sam Allardyce. Like, Sam Allardyce's MO is survival in the bottom half of the Premier League, isn't it? Whereas that is not ever going to be Pep Guardiola, but that doesn't make Guardiola less of a manager than Allardyce. But it does mean that I don't think some of the teams that Allardyce kept up, potentially Pep keeps up, because there's very, like you say, there's nothing that you can look back on for proof of that. But Pep's teams are loaded with talent. Pep hasn't ever managed a team that isn't loaded with talent, or loaded with the financial clout to add to that talent. Whereas, so back to the original question, could Guardiola or Klopp do what Rodgers has done at Leicester? I think the answer is, and
possibly not.
Guardiola has never shown that he's able to do it. I think Klopp kind of has. Whilst Liverpool have got a bit more money, Klopp has taken them further. But what Klopp has shown in those first couple of years that he was at Liverpool, took a team that was 8th and probably on paper, with the players there, was a team that you'd expect to finish 8th, took them to 4th inside a year. So, and that's what Rodgers has done at Leicester, right? His first half season at Leicester, 9th, next season 5th. So, yeah.
So
but equally,
to the question, yes and no.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is, could Rodgers do what Guardiola is doing at City? I don't think so. Maybe. But I don't think, or could he do, as good as, I think Rodgers did fairly well at Liverpool over his 3 years there. But when he left, I think it was, with Klopp available, it was a no-brainer. Why would you not have Jurgen Klopp as your manager just when he's not working anywhere else? But, if you put Rodgers in Klopp's position, rewind 2 years at Liverpool, when Liverpool finished 4th, and really the next step is that really you want to go on and push for the title. Does Brendan Rodgers win the title at Liverpool? Maybe not. Probably not. I'd say as good a manager as he is. So some managers cut out for clubs, some managers cut out for other clubs. I think Rodgers is right where he is suited at Leicester, and I think it works.
Yeah,
there we are. Fair enough. Should we move on to our shock of the week?
Let's do that.
Jack, do you want to go first? Because Josh and mine and Josh's shocks kind of link into the next topic of discussion.
Yeah, my shock of the week. I'm not a cricket guy. Let's get that first and foremost. I'm not a cricket guy. I don't know much about cricket, but I was alerted to this, and somebody else mentioned it. They actually messaged me saying, you need to talk about this because this is just incredible.
Okay.
But India beat Australia in the cricket. Now, that might not sound incredible
on
the face of things.
That's a big shock.
India, they're a
week.
classically great cricketing nation.
Yeah.
So are Australia. By no means are they not. But this was a 4-match series. And it was the circumstances which made this shocking because India had lost the first of the 4 matches. They got bowled out for 36.
Wow.
That's not very good.
That's
You're looking
horrendous.
at least 200 if you want a decent score.
Yeah.
So 36 is a bit of an embarrassment.
Yeah.
The pundits thought they'd lose 4-0. Their captain and best batsman, Viral Kohli, his name is, he left after that first one to be with his wife as she gave birth. Then, miraculously, they won the second match. But, everyone thought, people, it wasn't a foregone that they might win a game or two. So, they got the one game, then they drew the third. So now it's 1-1, and then they tied the third. So it's kind of a winner-takes-all in the final game, unless it's a draw, and then it just ends in a draw, which is a bit boring. But they drew that third one after batting for 120 overs,
wow.
which is quite incredible considering an over is 6 bowls. So, that's over 720 bowls, and they managed just to keep batting it through to make sure that the game eventually ended in a tie, because they didn't ever run them all out, which was good. But in the final match, this is what was the incredible thing. They had 5 injured players. I think as a team had only actually bowled 10 total wickets as a total, and the Australians had amassed over 1,000 as a total. Just 10 throughout their entire careers internationally.
It's not just the 1,000 of Australia that makes that mental. It's the small amount of Indian.
You need 10 just to win.
10 wickets is absolutely that's nothing. That's mental.
And Australia scored 300 in a place called the Gabba. Now the Gabba, the Australians haven't lost at the Gabba since 1988. It is nicknamed the Fortress. And the biggest ever chase down there before was 180. So they needed to chase down 300, which was almost double. And somehow they did it with an almost patchwork group of lads. Apparently it's so hard to win there because it's so dry and the service is so hard that the ball just bounces everywhere. And apparently just because the Australians are so used to it, they're really good at it. But since 1988, no other teams won there, and somehow India went in there with a complete patchwork group of lads and knocked Australia out of their own, of a competition they really should have been winning under the circumstances. The Australians were doing dirty tactics all the way through as well, like kicking dust around, like ruining sort of the way the batsmen sort of stand in a sense, where it's like you'll have little divots here and there, and they were sort of kicking all that stuff around just to put him off and stuff like that. They sort of deserved what came to them. But yeah, great shock. Great bit of sport.
That was a lot of stats in there as well. Fair dues.
Yeah.
That's how to do shock of the week, isn't it?
Looking at the notes, mine and Josh's and shock of the week is a little bit underrated, like a bit of a letdown, really. Anyway, my shock of the week, and we'll kind of touch on this a bit more later. So I'll just say what the shock is the Bills turning into absolute thugs against the Chiefs in the final quarter.
Absolutely.
Josh, your shock.
My shock was the Green Bay Packers giving up a touchdown on the stroke of half-time against Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That was shocking.
Yeah, it was a shock.
Flabbergasted.
Thank you, Jack. It was a shock because, so for context, the Buccaneers are driving up the pitch. They are nearly within field goal range, but not quite. So really, the question that was going through my head was, can Green Bay get a stop? And that's half time because Tampa Bay will go 3 and out, and whether there's time for Green Bay to take a knee, or kneel or whatever they call it. Then either way, if Green Bay make a stop, then it's half time. So the question going through my head was, can Green Bay make the stop, or can Tampa Bay get in range for a field goal? And the answer was neither, because the one thing that a team wouldn't want to do in that context, in a playoff game, on the stroke of half-time, is to give a wide receiver a route in behind for a touchdown. And what did Green Bay do? They let and this is Tom Brady with the ball in his hands, and they gave Tampa Bay a touchdown, and it's just inexplicable, like for a team to be doing that. And it then left Aaron Rodgers with a bit of an insurmountable task in the second half. So yeah, I was just watching it thinking, I cannot believe they have done that. Like the question in my head was, are they going to get off without conceding anything, or are they going to give Tampa Bay 3? And they ended up giving them 7. Unbelievable.
There we are. On that note, on to the NFL, to the championship round. I got it right that time, didn't I, Jack?
You did.
I good. Glad. So I was sat there then. I was like, right, I got to make sure I get it right the second time round because I fluffed it up the first time. Yes. So, which game are we doing first? Should we do Chiefs versus Bills first?
Yeah.
Let's do Chiefs versus Bills. Yep, big Kansas City Chiefs. All about them.
Chiefs.
That was like the least coordinated or effective thing ever. How about this? Chiefs! That's what I was doing. You were just so off.
There we are.
Coach Reed did it better, didn't he?
Yeah, there's a reason why Coach Reed does it. Yes, Jack, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Chiefs beat the Bills, so they're in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Get in there. Yeah. All round, it was a very good game for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
I mean, they went 3 and out with their first possession, but after that went touchdown, 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 kneel to end the half, field goal, touchdown, touchdown, kneel to end the game.
Well, and
so they just scored points for the remainder of the game.
Well, and we said this, didn't we? Like because we were watching it on a video call together, and we all kind of said that this is the best we've seen the Chiefs play in a while, really. As in, the Chiefs have had the look of a team for a good few games now, where they've kind of done enough. But
they play to their opponents almost.
yeah, you're right.
If they're good, they'll play
you're
good.
Right.
If they're bad, they'll play bad.
So Mahomes was in top form, which was good, given that he, there was doubt about whether he'd play because of the concussion. But he was just slinging it everywhere, wasn't he? And just being really smart. It was immense to watch.
He almost taught the NFL a lesson and said, "Hey, you may not vote for me for MVP this year, but I am the most valuable player in this league." And he literally is, because he is getting paid £500 million pounds, or dollars rather.
The thing is as well, is because obviously the Packers-Buccaneers game came first, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty. But, you were kind of watching that game, and that game had kind of been billed as Brady versus Rodgers, two of the greatest quarterbacks has ever been. And, they both threw a couple of interceptions. And you were kind of it was all right.
Brady threw 3. 3 interceptions from Brady.
Yeah.
That's spoilers, that is.
Which is unlike him.
No, I don't mind.
You're right. Brady threw a load of interceptions. And we were kind of all sat watching it, weren't we? We were like, whoa, that's quite a few.
It didn't look smooth.
No.
And the thing is, we've mentioned this before with when the Browns beat the Steelers. So I wasn't worried as a Chiefs fan. Obviously I was when Mahomes had his concussion. But up to that point, in a sense, I wasn't worried, because the only reason the Browns beat the Steelers was because they got about 4 or 5 turnovers of the ball.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff doesn't happen against the Chiefs. We hold that ball, and we very rarely give it away. I mean, apart from the game against Miami, where I think we gave it away 3 times, that was the only game that we've really had any bad decisions in terms of, just giving the ball away. But I don't think, regardless of which, whether the Packers or the Buccaneers came in, if either of them comes in giving away 3 or 4 possessions, it's like, the Chiefs are just going to eat them for dinner. I've got absolutely no worries.
Yeah. I mean, what were your thoughts in general, Josh? What were your thoughts on the game?
I thought it was, everything that Jack has just said, really. I thought the Chiefs, showed what they can do. Chiefs are known for being explosive, aren't they? But actually, like you said, recently we haven't seen the Chiefs at their explosive and fluent best. I don't think it's so much that the Chiefs have been playing poorly. I think, like Jack said, I think they've mastered doing enough to win. And, the NFL, we've seen it before. We saw it with Baltimore last season, didn't we? Baltimore absolutely, dominated the regular season. They were 14-2. and then they just bombed their first match in the playoffs. And really, it's all about the playoffs. Obviously,
the Chiefs just have that switch, don't they, where they go playoff time, let's go to torch some people, and that's what they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
They did it against the Texans. Went down 24-0, ended up scoring 7 consecutive touchdowns, then a field goal. So they're absolutely unreal. Every single game they played, it never looked like they're out of it.
No,
going into this one, it's like, yeah, okay, we haven't played well towards the end of the season, but it's playoffs. We bullied the Browns for those 3 quarters until Mahomes got injured.
Yeah,
and we bullied the Bills for most of that game. Until pretty much the fourth quarter when they started turning into thugs.
I was about to say, speaking of bullying, so basically it got to the fourth quarter and basically it just got away from the Bills in the end, didn't it? And then they just decided to just turn into absolute yobs.
They were standing on people's feet when they were on the ground. If somebody was sort of celebrating a little bit, they'd run up to them and just headbutt them. You were just like, guys, you lose with a bit of dignity.
Well, the thing that made me chuckle as well, and I don't know whether you guys noticed this, but when I was watching the coverage, the commentators were like, "Oh, you're seeing the frustration now of the team coming out. They've worked all season for this." I was like, every other playoff game we've watched so far, no team has done this. The Browns didn't do it. All of the other teams that we've watched, the Steelers didn't do it. They just haven't done it. But for some reason, it was almost like they were condoning this behaviour from the Bills, and I don't know about. But
it's assault if that's on the streets. You can't just go around holding people's knee ligaments while somebody else is pushing them over just to hope that they go. It's like, good gracious, these guys, they don't deserve to be on a field.
And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure you said it one point, Josh. You were like, get Mahomes off now.
Yeah.
Just get
it's
him
just not
off.
worth it. Yeah.
Bring Henny on. He can be injured. Just get Mahomes off. I agree exactly what both of you guys said. The Chiefs just absolutely dominated, and I feel like the 24 points for the Bills flatters them really.
Yeah. Well, we gifted them.
Well, we gave them 7.
Fumble kick return.
Or 6. Yeah.
And do you know what? I'm so glad Hardman managed to recover from that, because that must have been devastating when that happened. But then he had an absolute storm afterwards. So
it's almost like rule. The first playoff game the Chiefs play, they have to do a fumble, which pretty much leads to a touchdown.
Tradition.
And then from there on out, we will just go on semi-consecutive.
Well, all the mistakes are out now, ready for the Super Bowl.
To be honest, I'd have been worried if I'd have been worried if they didn't.
Yeah.
That's not true. That's not true. I was worried that they had, and because they hadn't been so explosive of late.
Yeah.
And
you were worried. Thing is, you were like, oh no.
Yeah, and they've always got the potential to just really cut loose, and in the end they did. But in my head, I was just holding this Bills team is a good team. I'm not saying that they're as good as the Chiefs. I don't think anybody would say that. But if the Chiefs don't play well, the Bills could beat them. It's the type of team where they're number 2 seeds for a reason.
They keep you honest.
Yeah, exactly. And the Chiefs are such a good team that there are probably a number of teams in the NFL that they could beat not playing well. I don't think the Bills were one of them. I think the Chiefs needed to play well, and in the end they played very, very well, and they blew them away, didn't they?
Almost humiliated. I mean, you take away the 6 points we gave them from that fumbled kick.
Allen only got 1 touchdown of note, didn't he? I think.
They only got that touchdown in the fourth quarter, and that was when the Chiefs were sort of letting them have it just to keep running the clock down in a way. Just let them get the easy yards, as long as you keep them inbound, keep the clock running. So, you take away those 13 points. We beat them 38-11 then. Josh Allen did not have a good game.
No.
He was sort of throwing all over the place and just missing everyone. He's decent with his running, but you're a quarterback, you've got to be able to pass. I mean, I was quite glad. It was almost just like full circle. It's like, well, you guys can win all your individual awards, but Mahomes is going to be the one with a ring at the end of the season, so don't matter.
He's unreal, mate, isn't he, Mahomes? He's just absolutely superb. And I'm not taking away from Aaron Rodgers. He's been brilliant this season as well. But Mahomes is just he's just like the perfect blend of everything that is good about all the other quarterbacks. He's got a rocket arm like Rodgers and like Allen has, to be fair, but he's a lot more accurate than Allen, and he can he's he's a good runner. Okay, he's not as good a runner as Lamar, but Lamar's passing leaves an awful lot to be desired. Whereas Mahomes is a good runner, easily good enough to slip in and out of the pocket and manufacture plays that shouldn't be on. And he's got the Brady-esque, he wins the clutch moments. When you really need your quarterback to come up and give you something, he does. Like that call in the third quarter against the 49ers in the Super Bowl last year, where the 49ers had kept us quiet all game, and then bang, all of a sudden when the Chiefs are desperate for a big reception and a bit of momentum, Mahomes gets it. And I think that combination of he wins clutch moments like Brady seems to win every clutch moment that he's involved in. He's got a big arm, he's accurate, he can run, and psychologically he's never beaten. And I think that it's just the perfect combination for a quarterback. And that one pass he made against the Bills where the rush had got to him, he kind of half got out of the pocket, but one of the Bills players basically had him grabbed with one arm around the waist, and he just threw this pass. And okay, it wasn't a huge pass, but it was 25 yards or so, 25 yards on the money,
no platform,
on the money, with neither of his feet planted on the floor and his body being spun away from the direction that he's trying to throw. So he's throwing the ball against the direction of his body travel because he's swiveling away from his receiver downfield, and he hasn't got either of his feet planted on the floor. And it's
just a freak of nature, he is.
Yeah.
Absolute freak that he can do that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Right, the other game, Buccaneers versus the Packers, finished 31-26 to the Buccaneers. I thought it was a really good game, to be honest. I thought it was a really good...
back and forth.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Like we said earlier...
You know what's crazy?
Go on.
If they hadn't got that touchdown before half-time, Packers win that game.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's I find that with NFL, one decision that happens earlier on in the game, it gets to the end, and you're like, it could completely change the complexion of the final quarter, basically, just in terms of how they play. Yeah, like we said earlier, Brady threw 3 interceptions, Rodgers threw 1. It was a bit of a weird game, wasn't it? It was exciting to watch, but it was a bit of a weird one. I don't know what you guys thought.
There were lots of drops. I'll be honest, the Packers had one guy, and I felt so bad for him at the end, but the guy called Kevin King, I think he was a cornerback for the Packers, but he was the one who let the touchdown before half-time happen, because it was his man who ran past him, and it was like, what are you doing, mate? Leonard Fournette was running earlier for a touchdown, and he should have been stopped about the 5 or 6 yard line by Kevin King, and he just bounced him and ran into the end zone. He was the one who was holding for the pass interference in pretty much to wrap up the game, because it gave the Buccaneers enough yards to run out the clock. It was just like, he just had the game of nightmares against them. But, yeah, to be fair, both Rodgers and Brady looked good, but there were lots of drop passes, and they look good but not insane. Like, Mahomes really does look like he is playing his lights out at the moment. And I don't know if either of them would have gone into Tampa Bay and won that game against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree. It was in... I think we kind of agreed on it. I said, I think I'd rather... Perhaps I'm kind of merging on to the next point now, but I think as a Chiefs fan, you were looking at the game and you were going, you'd rather play against the Buccaneers than the Packers. Just purely
because we've beaten them, yeah.
Well, and I think purely on the basis of, I feel like with the Packers there's an element of, if you kind of stop Rodgers, whether that's by, just trying to cream him every time he throws the ball, or, just going into a slanging match between Rodgers and Mahomes, I think... I don't know, I feel like with the Buccaneers, if it gets into a slanging match, in terms of who can throw the ball more and run around and all that sort of thing, I think there's only one winner really, and that's the Chiefs. Whereas with the Packers, I think, I feel like Rodgers has been that little bit better this season. But yeah. Don't know what people's thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chiefs are going to win it.
Yeah, so I guess those are our predictions then. Jack, you're saying Chiefs. I'm saying Chiefs. And Josh, you are saying...
Chiefs.
Look at that. The 3 Chiefs fans think the Chiefs are going to win. No, in all seriousness, I think that's... I think it'll be
I'm
the
more
Chiefs.
confident about this Super Bowl than the last one.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
The last one against the 49ers, I was 50-50. I didn't know who was going to win that.
Yeah. The prospect of facing the 49ers, it was like, oh goodness, this could be...
You know what though? The Buccaneers, they finished 5th.
Yeah,
in
this is what
the
I mean.
NFC.
Yeah.
And this is why I think football should have playoffs, because that way then, even teams that are 5th, currently Liverpool, even teams like that could end up winning it all.
On that note,
we have won it all inside 18 months. What more do you want? Do you want us to win it all a second time?
There we are. Should we move on to our stat of the week to finish off?
Let's do that.
Jack
Freeman, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, Liverpool still haven't won a game that Thiago has started. Played 5, drawn 2, lost 3. And that just surprised me.
Yeah.
I know, well, you know what I mean? You kind of think he does play better than most of Liverpool's midfielders.
Well,
but it's just like...
to be honest with you, I think Thiago's probably been the shining light in this period of darkness for Liverpool fans. There we are. My stat of the week is Mohamed Salah has scored 19 goals in all competitions this season, which is the joint most of any Premier League player alongside Harry Kane. And that could have been my shock of the week, to be honest, because I didn't realise that Salah had scored so many. But there we are.
How many hat-tricks has he scored?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I just wondered, because it doesn't seem like he scores consistently, but maybe he just scores.
No, well, that's what I mean.
Chunks.
I think he's probably scored I think he scored a couple against Leeds in the first game. He's probably scored like 2 in a couple of games and then not scored any in a few others. Well, there we are.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh, what was your stat of the week?
My stat for the week was that before last night, Man United had fallen behind in 7 Premier League games this season, more than anybody else, and they had won every single one. And that streak came to an end last night. And that stat has 2 sides of the coin. One side of the coin is that it shows how United have had the mentality to dig themselves out of matches which they could have lost 7 times this season, which you think is 21 points from losing positions.
It's impressive.
The flip side of that is that kind of volume of matches where you're falling behind is probably going to find you out at some point over a season. And, to have come from 8 losing positions and still won 7, that's still very good. Last night just happened to be when it found them out a bit.
They've fallen behind in more than 7 games for this season.
Yeah, sorry, it's maybe I didn't word that right. They've basically gained 7 wins from losing positions.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So sorry, I wasn't including.
Surely they've been behind more than 7 games, and if not, we've won every game. But no, I get you.
Hang on, let me think of my stat.
No, I get
what you're saying. I think that is the stat. Hang on.
What Jack is saying, on that basis, if it's only 7 games, that means they've won all of the others. But Jack's being a little bit cheeky there.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He's twisting your words.
I'm twisting your words, I am, because it was United.
There we are.
But we're not including draws in there either.
Okay.
No.
Fair enough. There we are. That's another episode of the Down to the Wire podcast done. Episode 12 finished. Thank you all very much for listening. Josh, thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me.
No, it was good to have you. We are on Spotify. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Breaker. We are on Pocket Casts. And we are on YouTube. Perhaps if you're on YouTube, give us a subscribe down below. Perhaps leave a comment to let us know what you think. And if you're on Spotify, why not give us a follow? And we will be back next week to give you the update on the latest and greatest in sport. So Jack and I will see you soon.